Hi everyone, and thank you for letting me in again. So, last video was an introduction into what I'll be covering in this channel and on this podcast. I introduced you, hopefully, to The Ethical Slut by Janet Hardy and Darcy Easton, an introduction into polyamory, alternative lifestyles, and different forms of love. So, without further ado, let's get to it then. The first sentence of this chapter asks the reader, what exactly is an ethical slut? Now, more than likely, you are if you're watching this video, or at the very least you're interested in it. I didn't know that there was an alternative to monogamy when I was younger, let alone heterosexuality. And it wasn't until I started exploring outside the confines of the traditional and, what we call normal, that I realized that my feelings were absolutely valid. Growing up in a Southern Christian household placed values on my shoulders that I couldn't shake off easily. Marriage, straight, one man, one woman, all of these things were unquestionable even. This coupled with the fact that I didn't have many people to talk to about this with and navigate these feelings and desires, and of course that didn't help. It wasn't until fairly recent years that I was able to question some of these things that had always been told to me in regards to relationship and sex. Instead of addressing the fact that I was able to love multiple people or even desired multiple people or people of different genders, and of course, it wasn't until recently that, people have even started to accept the idea that there are multiple genders. And not knowing that this was perfectly okay, I hid it. I lied and cheated to cover up my own sexual desire. Now, was this my fault? Most certainly, yeah, of course. However, in my mind, I didn't know that it was even an option to see multiple people or even fall in love with multiple people. The environment behind that subject is so wrought with the number 2, and that it's the only way that I internalize it as it being something wrong with me for having these desires, or internalize it as, an addiction or some way that if I feel this way, that I'm hurting the other person, so there's no way I could hurt them like that because it's a problem with me and it has nothing to do with them. And while both of those subjects are entirely true, I didn't know that there was another way. And even with that in mind, some will say that it's okay to have these desires and normal, but it's not okay to pursue them. But why is that? Why shouldn't we be able to pursue our desires, sex, love, and intimacy freely, as long as it's honest? Continued in the first chapter, the authors speak of cultural blind spots that tend to present themselves as centrist. A few of those are couple-centrism, heterocentrism, and Eurocentrism. These things are portrayed in our media consistently and even longer in our non-electronic media. Television and internet were not the forerunners of the king and queen narrative, Romeo and Juliet, or even Adam and Eve. These stories have been subconsciously fed to us since we were in diapers, and the same to those before us. Now, unfortunately, many of the words that describe us sex positivity and relationship positivity convey a message of what they aren't rather than what they are. The term open relationships implies a message that all relationships are only valid if they are closed, and that open ones aren't necessarily natural or invalid. It implies that the default of relationships are closed, but I believe that's just the current narrative. And I don't believe that it's necessarily true. Non-monogamy implying what it is not rather than what it is. A relationship style, not another relationship style. Simply a relationship style. Extramarital sex, premarital sex, both implying what they aren't rather than what they are. Sex before someone decides to get married, if they actually have a choice in the matter, is an entirely other subject to broach. These terms imply that sex before marriage is not normal or natural. However, the terms normal and natural denote different things, and it would be wise to recognize them as two totally different words, and they have absolutely no correlation with each other. The rest of the chapter gives a brief talking to on Alfred Kinsey of the Kinsey Institute. He did an experiment, actually, involving thousands of American couples, different races, ages, backgrounds, and socioeconomic status. He asked them a series of questions involving their sex lives and their romantic lives. And what Dr. Kinsey found was that regardless of what most people do of their homes or even say they are interested in, it's rarely what they're really interested in. And it's even rare that it's something they'd like to do if they had another option. Kinks, fetishes, role play, BDSM. These are just a few of the subjects broached by Dr. Kinsey. He found that a plethora of people actually were more intrigued by these ideas and the notion of doing what was seen at the time as forbidden or naughty. Humans over time have always pushed back against the idea of normalcy and decency. Both words do not denote anything innate within people, but a social stigma and cultural boundary set upon the majority by the few with influences, resources, and power. I hope that over time, we as people take these things back, that we snatch back our sexuality, our sensuality, and promiscuous power from those who blush and gag at the thought of what hides in our innermost sensuous desires. Now that's all for today, and I will be back tomorrow, hopefully with another video and chapter 2 in the Ethical Slut. Thank you so much for coming back and listening, and have a great rest of your day.